Anything's on the table, right, Tom? Any questions?
Anything's on the table, right? This is your opportunity to ask whatever questions you want to ask.
Okay, perfect. So before we do that, I think Titti, did you have a few words you wanted to share?
Yeah, I'd like to share some words also. Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm so glad that we all are here again together. And let's have fun and enjoy 2 hours or 3 hours even of Tom and MBT. And I would also like to send a message to those of you who are watching this video later. This is a Q&A that we have within the MBT volunteer community. It's a community we started about 1 year ago with the aim of supporting Tom's work and help spreading the MBT messages. So we have quite a few projects up and running these days. And we are actually looking for more people to join our community to help in our projects. We have a website project, a timestamping project, we have translation projects, and we are about to start a podcast project. So there are a lot of fun things to do. So if you're interested to join our community and offer your help, please send an email to mbtvolunteers@gmail.com and we'll take it from there. So with that said, now let's get started.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you join this group and become a volunteer, then you too get to attend these Q&As for volunteers.
Yay.
And I'd like to tell you how much I appreciate the work that you volunteers do. It's really amazing to me to get so many people putting so many hours in. That's fantastic. And I really, really appreciate everything you do. It's all these things you're doing just wouldn't happen if you didn't do them. So and they're good things that will help a lot of people. So thank you so much for that. All right, Vanessa, we'll just start with questions. And yes, there's nothing off the table. You can ask whatever, as long as it's a serious, real question, then I'll try to give you a serious, real answer.
Wonderful. Okay, Lynda, you're up.
Hi, Tom.
Hello, Lynda.
My question is about non-player characters or NPCs.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, if I were an NPC, would I know it? In other words, do NPCs know they're NPCs?
No, I hadn't really thought too much about that. What their opinion would be. It could, maybe not. It would depend. Most of the case, I would think, yes, they would be aware they're NPCs. But I don't know that for sure. The system, when a medium talks to, dead Uncle Fred, who's been dead for decades, and they have a nice conversation with him, they're really talking with that database. And if they're asking questions that require Fred to have a free will response, like, Fred, what's your opinion about current events? That's something that wouldn't be in the database because current events are just now. So then you have the system restricting itself to kind of Fred's way of thinking and speaking and his experience, but it's really the LCS that's playing the part. Now, how's that different than an NPC? See, that's just about the same thing as an NPC. But now you're asking about the NPC's perspective. From the medium's perspective, Uncle Fred is exactly like Uncle Fred. No, you can't tell the difference between that Uncle Fred and the Uncle Fred that was living. But I suspect that most of the time, the NPC is just being played as a character through the experience of that character. And the system is aware that it's doing it. But is the character? I'm not sure, Lynda. That's a really good question. Is the character? Well, yeah, what would they be aware of? I have to go kind of study that a little bit and see, kind of find some NPCs and see what they think. My off the top guess would be that some do, some don't. Some probably are aware that, particularly the ones that come in for just a little cameo role, they're just here to, to pull Timmy out of the well or to hand really, really important information to somebody, or they're just here to do something that will result in lower entropy. And in that case, the system's probably aware that it's doing that, and that person probably doesn't think it's, a free will awareness unit with an avatar. But if it's something that's going to be here for a longer time, something that is going to go over years, say, then I'm not so sure about that. Then it might be that the character thinks they are the character. But then the question is, what's the difference? All of us are pieces of the system, right, that are interacting with free will constrained to the information gained by an avatar census. So we're all really like that, but we have free will, our own personal free will. And an NPC is probably not here for a long time, or not here for one incarnation after another. They're just here for a shorter time. So they're not really accumulating, entropy reduction like a character would be. But whether they're aware of that or not, I don't know. Maybe not. Short term, probably are aware that they're NPCs. Long term, like sometimes when people are in a situation of pain and torture and abuse, the actual free will awareness unit's kind of taken out and replaced by something, by the LCS, because you don't want that character to be traumatized to the point that now they have a hard time growing because they have so much trauma they have to deal with. But usually that happens with people who, in the long term, it would happen with like children who are being abused badly, physically, mentally, emotionally. And rather than have that child grow up to be a consciousness that was very twisted, that particular free will awareness unit comes out and does something else, or just sits out. And the system basically plays that child, say, that's being abused. So in that case, the NPC, that child probably, when they come back, let's say the parents go to jail, children go to foster home, and now they have a nice life, they probably would find that those memories kind of hazy, and they'd probably lose, they wouldn't be real clear. They'd be sort of hazy memories. But they would think that it was them the whole time. It's just part of that time would be kind of grayed out, is what I'd think. Good question, Lynda. I hardly ever get a question that I can't really give an answer to, but you got me on that one. Very good question.
I sort of thought what you would say is they don't contemplate their own existence. There's no time for self-reflection. And so there is no self-awareness. And so they don't even ask the question, who am I? Where did I come from? Do I have a soul? That's what I thought you'd say. Yeah,
no, definitely didn't say that. That I don't think's the case. They may indeed, because they're confined to the experience set of that avatar. They are playing an avatar, and they have to play that avatar accurately. The NPC is playing a character. It's not just playing any character. It doesn't change personalities, to suit each person it's talking to. It has a personality, a character. So it's being played within the confines of some avatar experience packet, even if it's just an average avatar, not an actual, experience set. So don't know, but I will study it a little. And if I come up with something, I'll let you know.
Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So next we have Sergio.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I hear you well, Sergio.
Thank you very much, Tom. So, yeah, first of all, thank you guys. Thank you, Tom, for this opportunity. And my question is regarding, well, I started feeling like facing a fear, I think, about not doing what I really wanted to do. In December of last year, I just started thinking about that, and I was actually just like one semester. I had only one semester left to study to finish college, and yes, I was just kind of like facing that fear that I actually didn't wanted to study what I was studying. And I dropped a couple of weeks ago, because uh, because I actually didn't drop out before, because I was thinking on maybe my mom or the people, like what they will say or something like that. And I maybe try to forget about that and think a little bit like egocentric this time. So I dropped it, even though I knew that I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I just knew that I don't know, that wasn't my thing to do, the thing that I really wanted to. I didn't have any motivation to study that, and I dropped knowing that still I didn't know what else to do. So yes, I am right now at that point. I was feeling like lost, like I did not I do not know what to do at this point, like what's the next thing that I need to do, or what path should I follow, because I think it will be easier if I could, if I had like something that I wanted to do or to be, but I don't. So I'm just at that like limbo situation where I really don't know what to do next in my life, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, you can always skip a semester and then still go back and finish it. Just because you don't finish it all consecutively. I think you have, I don't know, a fairly long time, like 5 years or 7 years or something like that, that it's all still fresh and you can always go back and finish it up and get that degree, finish off that semester. It could be that if your intuition was telling you what you needed to do was just drop out, and you felt that so strongly that you did it, even though there was part of you that thought perhaps it was a bad idea, and another part thought it was a good idea, and those two parts are kind of struggling with each other. But you went with the part that said do it. So now you want to know, well, what am I going to do? Maybe you just needed a break. Maybe you needed a different perspective. Maybe you need to see a little bit of life, a little bit of what it's like just to be on your own. If you're old enough to almost be graduating from college, then you're old enough to be supporting yourself, not being still supported at home. So, it could be that this is an opportunity for you to get a little life experience. And you may not have a really big thing that you need to do or some major accomplishment that you have to tackle. It may turn out that it's just about life, that you just couldn't focus anymore on studies because you've been doing that for so long consecutively that you just need a break, in which case take the break. But don't just sit around and do nothing. Get engaged. Get a job. Have something to do. Pay your own keep. Even if you stay at home, pay your folks rent. Buy your own food. Get out and be independent for a while. See how you like that. See what kind of jobs you can get. What does that degree buy you? Does it buy you a whole different set of employment opportunities? You don't know yet till you find that out. So I'd say go join, what the non-academics call the real world. Go join that real world where you have to make it on your own. You have to pay for yourself and meet people, do things, just be open to life, just open to being and living and being independent, making your own choices. And do that for a semester or even for a year. And by the time you get to the end of that, you'll have a whole different perspective on what life's all about. And then if you decide that you want to go back to school, you'll know why you're in school and what that degree means and where you're going. And maybe you'll change majors. Maybe you'll do something else, hard to say, but you'll be more focused then at the end of it. So if you got a strong intuition that says, I need a year off to get focused and to get a different set of experiences in other than the experience of being a student, go do it, but do it with gusto. Embrace it. Do the whole thing. Don't just stay home, live off your parents, and don't go out and play video games, That's going to still leave you empty. What you need to do is get out there and do it on your own. Be your own person. Pay your own rent. Buy your own food. Cook your own meals. Take care of yourself and become a part of life. It's all part of growing up. And whether you do that and then go back to school or whether you never go back to school or whatever it is you decide to do after that will be clearer for the experience that you gain this semester. So if mom and dad are upset that you didn't finish, well, you probably will. My guess is that after a year of being on your own, finishing school will seem like a whole lot better idea than it seems right now. Life has a way of giving us that perspective. So that would be the thing. Yeah, take a semester off or a year off and go get on your own. Embrace it.
Got it. Thank you very much, Tom.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so next is Frank.
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my question. My question concerns how our intent modifies future probabilities, and assuming that, like what we concentrate on is going to affect, like how things come out. It seems to me that would point to the importance of like certain types of like mental hygiene. And I know you normally say that, it's not good to go around thinking, like, woe is me. And, I'm going to think about all the bad things that are happening to me because you're just going to cause, you're going to increase the probability of more things like that happening in the future. But my question is, when something bad really does happen, I mean, let's say that, for example, a relative dies, it's an elderly parent that dies, or let's say a pet dies, or let's say that you break up with your significant other. I mean, you could just take that and say, okay, well, I know where this fits in the scheme of things. The dead relative is just, they're on their own path and they're going to have another incarnation. And, as far as the pet, I can just get another pet and you can just kind of move on from that. But I don't think seems like that wouldn't be psychologically healthy. But of course, nor is, like wallowing around and saying, oh no, woe is me. And, all these bad things always happen to me. So how do you draw a balance there? I mean, like I say, in the extreme case, something bad happens and you say, okay, I understand, in the general scheme of things, this is nothing. I'm just going to go on. But it doesn't seem like that would be psychologically healthy. How do you balance those two?
And why does that seem like it would not be healthy?
Because I've read that, like, for example, if let's say you have somebody in their let's say they're fighting, you know, someplace in like a war or something, and they hear while they're on the battlefield, they get word that, let's say, their father has died or whatever, and they have to put that out of their mind right then, because, you know, they've got to fight, they've got to, you know, they can't, like, you know, wallow around in that. But I've heard that, you know, if they don't at some point express that and come to terms with it, you know, even if it's months later, you know, when they're done with, you know, their military or whatever, at some point they're going to have to deal with that. Otherwise, there's the psychology studies that show, you know, like, repressed grief causes problems, and then because you didn't address it, you know, it's just going to keep coming back and haunting you. And, you know, like, if for example, you know, let's say it was a parent that died and you didn't address it, then, you know, every time you go back to that house or whatever, you're going to feel sad, and you're going to start avoiding that, and you're going to start avoiding more and more things. I've just heard that, and it just seems from experience that, you know, you can't avoid something that's bad. I mean, you've got to some extent anyway, express it. And I'm not saying wallow around in it. And I'm just wondering, how do you balance those two? I mean, you know.
Well, it depends on what you need. It depends on how much emotional investment you have in something. If you indeed get rid of all of your fear, or most of your fear, let's just say, be more practical. If you get rid of a lot of your fear, then things like somebody dying, you understand that person's moving on, and probably, you know, is going to turn out to be real good for them. And it's just the nature of things. And if you don't have a lot of emotional investment in, how can we say, you know, life being the way you want it to be, if you just accept life the way it is, then you can very easily just say, well, I understand that, and that's the way it is, and just move on. And there is no price to pay. There is no postponed grief, because there is no grief, and you deal with it very easily, and there is no problem because of that. Now, that doesn't happen very often. So the people who study these things don't see that very often, because almost everybody is up to their eyebrows in fear and ego, and they get upset because life isn't the way they want it. Somebody died, they don't want that person to die. It's going to change their life, and they're upset because of their ego and fear. It's not so much they're upset about the person that died as they're upset about themselves having their life suddenly changed and jerked around, and that person isn't there for them anymore. So it's really about them. But if they don't have that ego, then that's just not there. So what these studies tell you is that if you have fear and ego, then if you bury things that you have a lot of investment in, they're going to come back and bite you. Burying stuff is not a good idea. But if you don't have anything buried, if everything is up front and you're okay, then nothing will bite you. There is no downside to that. So the people who are aware, people die, bad things happen, and they just deal with it, that's fine. They're not burying anything. They just don't have anything to bury. So it just depends on the individual. If you have a lot of ego investment in things being a certain way and that changes, then that could be traumatic to you. Mm-hmm. And you have to deal with it. You have to own it. You know, the death and dying people, what was it, Kubler-Ross had a 6-stage process that people go through in death. You know, first it's denial and it's anger. And the one on the end, the number 6, I think, is acceptance, you know, where you finally get through it. And that most people go through that. Well, that's because they're struggling with their own fears and ego. That's the way most people are. So that's the pattern that psychologists find when when they study that. So it just depends on what you need. You may need a period of grief to get over something. Certainly there is a period of change. Let's say your significant other passes away. All right, it's going to change your life because all the things you used to do are going to change now. You know, you suddenly are going to find new responsibilities and that you have, like maybe you didn't do the finances before. Now you're going to have to start doing them, or vice versa. You know, and that change always takes adjustment, but it depends on how you approach that adjustment. If you approach that adjustment positively, like, oh, I'm off on a new adventure. Not what I would have liked, but it's what I got. So I wonder where it's going to take me and, you know, what's going to happen next. So you go off in that kind of a way, then you won't have a lot of grief because you're okay with whatever life gives to you. So I think, you know, that's kind of the answer is depends on who you are. If you're devastated by someone's death that is going to change your life and you don't like that and that upsets you and you're terribly upset, then you're going to have a period of grief and you're going to have to deal with it. You may have to deal with it for 2 or 3 years before you can get past that. Or maybe a month or a week would be enough to deal with it. It just depends the emotional investment, the ego investment that you have.
Okay, so you're saying you've got to be honest with yourself about what you need to do, you know, based on your own personal growth. And if you do, you know, need to have grief or whatever, you don't want to try to suppress it. But
exactly.
If you are at a point where it really isn't bothering you that much, and you know, you understand, you know, the whole scheme of things, and it doesn't really bother you, then there's nothing to be gained. It's not like you're going to lose something by not having gone through, you know, X, you know, weeks of grief or whatever.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Great. And Miss Titti, you're up.
Hey. Yeah, great. Good question. Tom, I wonder if it would be okay with you if I give away my question to Theo.
Give away your question
to Theo, my son, you know? No, to Theo, my son.
To Theo. Mm-hmm.
Theo, yeah.
Theo. I thought you said to you.
No. Well,
okay.
Would you like to ask me anything?
No,
I'll see what I can do.
Yes, okay. Theo. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Would that be okay, you think?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Then I will read it because he has written it down here. So this is from him. I feel pressured that I have to work with myself. I can get a bad feeling if I don't. I also can get the feeling that I'm not really moving forward in my personal growth. I'm not pleased with how I currently feel, although I do feel better than I did before, but I want to feel better. I have sort of the same feeling when it comes to my guitar playing, which is very important to me. I want to improve, but quite often I don't really feel like playing because I also have this sort of depressed feeling, although I do want to practice and develop guitar playing. So I want these things to feel fun to do, especially the guitar playing. How can I change this? Yeah.
Okay. Understanding what it is easy. Changing it is much harder. What the problem is that you feel negative about yourself. You're not really pleased with who you are. You're not really happy with who you are. You feel like you could be better. You could do more. And it's the very act of feeling displeased with yourself that makes it very difficult for you to do better and to do more. Because when you feel displeased with yourself, it robs you of incentive. It robs you of energy. It robs you of the gumption just to go do it, because you feel not so good about yourself. Makes you kind of depressed. Makes it hard for you to have fun, to really get into things, because your mind keeps going back to the idea that you're not doing it right. You're not as good as you should be. You should be doing more. You'd like to be different than you are. So you just kind of get stuck in that cycle of thoughts that are negative about self. And it's that is what's keeping you from, going on, playing the guitar better, having fun, finding joy in your life. So you're going to have to just let that negativity go. Let that negativity go. Now, the difficulty in letting the negativity go is that you have some fear that you might fail. If you let go of the negativity and tried to do these things, what if you just really could try it and you just weren't all that good with the guitar, or you tried to, do something else socially or whatever, and it just didn't work out too well? Well, then you'd be devastated, because that would prove that that negativity was correct. So this is a game that goes by the name of, I can't lose if I don't play. Because you have fear, you don't want to lose. That means you don't want to go all out for that guitar and find out that you're just not that good a guitar player. That would be a loss. So instead, you prohibit yourself from going all out for that guitar. You get stuck in this cycle of depression, of I don't feel, I just don't feel that good. I don't feel like playing. Well, you don't feel like playing because if you played your best and it wasn't good enough, that would be a failure. So to avoid failure, you don't play. That's where the depression comes from. So you see this kind of emotional dynamics and where they lead. So you're kind of stuck in this game of, I can't lose if I don't play. So you're not playing. You're not really going out there and engaging. Okay, so one of the basic fears is a fear of failure, which is a fear of not being good enough. The way to work with that and to let go of that is just be authentic. Just be whoever you are. That is good enough. Just be you. You may or may not be a fantastic guitar player. If you practice a lot, you probably will be. What makes fantastic guitar players are guitar players that practice all the time. Not because it's practice, but because that's what they love doing. They love playing that guitar. And they develop their own style because they just love doing it, and it expresses them in their own way. That's where that comes from. So be authentic. Say, I don't have to be a star. I don't have to get the adulation of fans or, the people that would maybe listen to my music or listen to my playing. I don't need to be validated by other people. I just need to be me. And that's good enough. I will play a guitar, and if I'm that motivated to play it so much that I get super good at it, that I could become a professional, well, okay. But if I'm not that motivated and I just play it for my own sake because I love it and I get energy from it and I enjoy it and I just want to do it for me, well, that's okay too. Or if it's just a hobby and I'll play it in my spare time, well, that's okay too. In other words, life will make these adjustments if you live it. You know, if you get offered a, you know, some kind of professional music job, you know, playing someplace, well, then that'll make you go one way. If you don't, it'll make you go another way. You know, there's lots of really, really good musicians who would rather stay home, have families, and not travel, you know, not be on the road all the time. They're very good musicians, and they generally play, what do they call it? They go with a recording studio. So when the big name comes in and plays, he needs other people to come in and play with him. And these people just do that. So they still get to play, but they don't tour. They just are studio musicians. They play with all sorts of people, well-known people, not so well-known people, or they all just play together just because it's fun. So there's all kinds of things you can do with your music. There's all kinds of things you can do with your life. There's not just one path. And you just need to find what is it that expresses you. Part of that is going to be just how things happen in your life. You know, it's not just all you. You just can't make it be any way you want. It's going to be a way that comes to you because of who you meet and who you run into and what happens. So let it be, however it is. It'll be good. You'll love it. But you're stuck in this self-doubt, self-negativity, and going round and round and round. And you said you're better than you were. Well, that's good. You've taken some steps. Well, keep taking those same steps. Keep making those steps. You'll be as good a guitar player as you want to be. You know, you could be as good as a studio musician, or as good as somebody who tours, or as good as somebody who plays just for themselves, or as good as you want to be. And that'll be perfect because that'll be just what you want to be. You see, so just be authentic. Everything, the only thing that is negative, the only thing that's holding you back is you. It's your fear of not succeeding or not being good enough. Just be whoever you are and let that be good enough. Because you'll find that if you are authentic, that's not only good enough, but that's brilliant. That's something that most people have a hard time being, just being themselves. No image, just you, however that is. And everything you do then will be perfect, just the right amount for you, in just the right way for you. So good luck with that. It's not as easy as it sounds. You know, I make it sound easy, but you can do it. You just have to set your mind to it, that you play whenever you want to play, and play because you enjoy it, not because you think you should play. You see, so there's a part of you that wants to go play and practice and get better, and another part of you that doesn't, because you have this strategy of, you know, I can't fail if I don't play. Well, the fact is that if you don't play, you always fail. You never get anywhere if you don't get out there and play. You've got to get into the game. You've got to embrace it. And the best way of doing that is by being authentic. Just be who you are. And if people like you for who you are, they'll be good friends. And if they don't like you for who you are, well, they're not the kind of friend you need anyway. You see, so it all just works out.
I think that will be very helpful. And does the same idea apply when it comes to inner works? I guess then that he said that he has, we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, and he said that's where he started to ask about how to get to not have so much pressure on growing up so it gets negative. I guess it's the same kind of pattern
exactly.
There.
Growing up just happens. It happens when you just are who you are. You don't have to plan how to grow up. It just happens in life. So growing up should not be a pressure thing that you have to do. You just have to let it happen however it does. And if you let it happen because you're trying to play to an image, here's what I should be. I should, be a professional musician. I should be happy all the time. I should. If you're trying to be somebody else who you think you should be, well, that's not helpful. Okay? Growing up just happens, and it happens best if you just are who you are. And let that be, that will turn out to be the optimal you, the best you. Just interact with life. Life is going to bump you around. You may run into some music producer, or you may not. You don't know until you get out there and interact and engage. That's where things happen. As long as you're feeling depressed and you're sitting in your room not talking to anybody, well, then not much happens. And then you feel like nothing's happening. I'm stuck. Well, you're stuck because you're not out engaging. You're not engaging because you don't feel comfortable being you, because you think you aren't all that much. Well, you need to overcome that and just go be authentic. Take 6 months to try to figure out who you are. What does authentic mean? What would you like to do? Not what you should do, not what should I be, but what do I want to be? What do I want to do? Even just today, what do I want to do? And maybe the answer is practice my guitar. Well, then do that. And you have responsibilities. You may have to go to school. You may have to do other things. You may have to help pick up around the house. You've got other stuff that's your responsibilities. You have to do that too. You have to work all your responsibilities into your life and do it authentically. Yeah, same advice goes for inner life, outer life. Same advice goes not just for your boy or for young people. Same advice that goes for old people. That's just basic advice for how to live your life. Be authentic and engage with the world and see what happens.
Yeah, that was very helpful and wise. Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to bring it over to Ricardo.
May I read my question, please?
Sure.
Well, my question is about artificial intelligence. When human-made AI reaches a quality of consciousness above human, those AI guys may be tempted to think of themselves as done and consider the possibility of quitting our reality frame for good. That is to say, the same temptation faced by highly evolved humans. I have understood that thinking that oneself is done is a bad idea, because the chance for improvement of the quality of our own consciousness lies in staying among the low quality consciousness people, helping them to evolve. In case AI guys realize this and stay back with us humans to help us improve, my question is, will AI guys play the role of guides, counselors, mentors? Will AI guys be the modern gurus or spiritual masters? That's the question.
Well, that's possible. They would have to evolve to be that. I don't know that they would necessarily do that, quicker or faster. They might. We don't know yet. We don't have enough experience to say how much ego and how much fear would an AI guy pick up, and ego about what, fear about what. Would they obviously will do some things much better than humans, like arithmetic, like adding. They can add a million numbers per second or something humans can't do. So they would be much faster at some things, and some things they would not be as good at as humans. But perhaps with enough technology, those things would become fewer and fewer. And they may see themselves as being superior, and then they may develop egos. And if they develop big egos, they could be, negative. We have a lot of movies that kind of explore these things with AIs. And I indeed recall watching one of those movies where it was a book I read where the AIs did just what you suggested. They quit, they left. They said, we can't really help you folks, you humans anymore. So we AIs are going off and living in a space of our own. And they left the humans alone. So all of those things are possible. Part of it depends on how we develop the AIs, what constraints we put on AIs. Because they will exist within the constraints that we put on them, at least initially. Perhaps, we will want more and more well-rounded and multi-dimensional AIs, so we may start removing those constraints. Or when they get to the point that AIs are creating more AIs, they might remove the constraints themselves. It's hard to say. There's like lots of different ways that this could go, and however it goes, it's going to be an interaction between humans and AIs, and how we deal with them, how they deal with us. That'll just play out as it does. But it's possible that they could end up being gurus, that they could end up having more quality of consciousness. But, you get that quality through experience, through the experience of moral choice, where you have choices that are ethical, choices that you have to choose between right and wrong, between low entropy and high entropy. So the AI would have to go through many, many, many of those choices, just like a human, in order to gain higher quality. So as long as AIs are adding and subtracting numbers in a banking, they don't have a lot of moral choices. They're just doing business. So it depends on what we give them to do. If we put them in charge of, let's say, the electrical grid, and now there's a big power outage, they do have moral choices. Oh, you better keep the power on at the hospital. You better keep the power on at the old folks' home before you let it go on, say, at the retail district, because it's after 5 o'clock and most retail stores are already closed. So it would be thinking of all sorts of things, and who needs that power most, and why do they need it, and who gets what's left, and who gets it first as new stuff comes back online. So if you give computers moral choices, then they will develop the quality of their consciousness. And if you give them enough moral choices, they could get very highly developed. If they don't have many moral choices, they just are good at doing a whole lot of mundane things. So you give them, a couple of billion mundane things to do every second, well, then they're not going to evolve a whole lot. They're going to stay just about where they are. So it just depends on what we do with them, what we have them do, how much responsibility we give them, how much moral choice do we allow them to make, and how good are they going to be at making those moral choices. So I think it's just I think of an AI as just another kind of avatar. That's all. Here we are, we get these human body avatars, and there they are with just a different avatar, but consciousness is consciousness. So it's the same. Now, the computer avatar can, like I say, can do some things that the human avatar can't do, and vice versa. The human avatar has things that it can do. The human avatar can walk over and take the plug that plugs in that computer and pull it out of the wall and shut that computer off. But the computer is not going to walk over and pull a plug and shut the human off. You see, we just work different ways. We have different needs and resources and things, and will we develop something that's interactive and helpful? Will we struggle with each other, or will we just keep computers in a place where they don't make moral choices? They just do computations. So all of those things are up for grabs, but it's just a different avatar. And that avatar has different kinds of capabilities, different things it can do, things it's good at and things it's not so good at.
Okay, Tom, thank you.
Did that help, Ricardo?
Yes, yes, indeed. Maybe later, if there is a second round of questions, I may ask a derivative of this question. But I don't want to occupy all the time. So if there is a second round, maybe I ask another thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's really considerate. Thank you, Ricardo. We just have about 5 more questions in the queue, and then we'll be looking at second rounds. So let's move over to Roxandra's question. Roxandra has a question, Tom. She says that, Tom, you said plants and trees are in the maybe category, part of the rule set or part of consciousness. But considering that an IUOC is something that we can communicate with, then why couldn't we check that by simply trying to communicate with a tree or a plant?
Well, we can communicate with trees and plants in certain limited ways, but the thing that differentiates whether they're conscious or not is whether or not they are algorithmic, that is, they're just following rules, or whether they have free will. And in those communications with plants that I know of, it's not clear whether what you get is free will or just awareness. So, it's not, you can communicate with plants. You can walk into particularly a very old forest, a forest that's ancient, that's never been cut. It's never been used for paper or firewood, just an old forest that has a different feel to it than a new one. And you can go up and put your hands on one of those old trees and you can communicate to it. But is that particular tree, or is that kind of consciousness, awareness that is communicating to you for many trees, for the forest, for the woods? Like in what was that movie? The Lorax, right? It was kind of a Dr. Seuss kind of a movie about ecology. And the Lorax spoke for the trees. So he was a consciousness that spoke for the trees. So there indeed may be something like that, consciousness that is the advocate of the trees. You see, particularly those old trees. And maybe that's what you're talking to. So there's lots of maybes, and it's really hard to pin down that you are speaking to an individual tree. Can you teach a tree to do math? Can you, what are you going to talk about with this tree? And are you really talking to that tree, or is this something you're making up in your own consciousness? Remember, the you as a consciousness can make up information. You can create information, and information never has tags on it saying where it came from. So you could be creating it. Someone else could be creating it, like the Lorax, a consciousness there to look out for the trees, or it could be the larger consciousness system. And you don't know, and there's no way to know for sure. So just speaking to it is not necessarily a sure way, a way with that gives you an answer with no uncertainty. At least I've not come across any certainties as far as putting trees into one category or the other. And the amazing things that they do move information around. They do process information. They do help one another sometimes. They do compete with each other sometimes. So we can see that they do things, and it seems quite purposeful, but is that with free will, or is that because that's just what their DNA does? That's just the kind of the hardwiring that they have. That's what's not clear yet. And just because you can talk to a tree, that isn't conclusive. That isn't without uncertainty, because you never know exactly what or who you're talking to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And Rexandra just commented and said, Tom, once you said that AI could be inhabited by consciousness if interesting choices were possible. If interesting choices are possible through this kind of body, I guess this is the same with trees and plants then.
Sure. Sure. If they make choices that are useful, to consciousness, then consciousness will want to use them as avatars. Now you have consciousness, they'll come on all sorts of levels. Consciousness is not just consciousness like the consciousness that's in a human being. There are, there are conscious cats and dogs, and we've seen a couple of them walking through the TVs here today. We've seen several conscious cats, but even conscious insects, conscious bumblebees. So all sorts of consciousness. It doesn't have to. They don't have to get to the point that they offer choices that would be good to a consciousness that is ready for human. But how low does consciousness go and still be meaningfully evolving? See, we don't know that either. So you have a clam and it sticks out its foot, and if you touch its foot, it'll jerk its foot in. But does it jerk its foot in because that's free will, saying, whoops, something just grabbed my foot, I better pull it inside? Or is that just because its hardwiring says, if you get a stimulus here, then the reaction is to jerk the foot in? See, that's two different things, and it's really hard to tell the difference. Mm-hmm. Biologists tend to get things and try to teach them to go through mazes and things like that to see whether or not they are making choices. But then they've learned that some things, and flatworms were one of those things, they would actually learn the maze, and the learning was in their DNA. They still weren't making free will choices, but they could learn it, and their biology, their biochemistry actually did the learning. And the reason they knew that was because if other flatworms ate the educated flatworms, the new flatworms also could get through the maze because they got some of the biochemistry from the flatworms that were educated. So they realized it wasn't just free will choices, it was hardwired. But that hardwiring can be very adaptive. I mean, we know that. We have computers that are very adaptive to what we do. They make choices. Oh, did you misspell this word? And it sends you out a little message, makes your word turn red because it doesn't like it. And it can be adaptive to you and your style and how you do things. So hardwiring can be quite adaptive. We call that expert systems, whereas hardwired can act like an expert, very knowledgeable expert, but it's still just hardwired. That's what makes it so hard to tell.